Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, April the 11th, 2025. There isn't a full moon today, even though I've got a full moon on the thumbnail. The full moon is actually over the weekend on Saturday or Sunday, depending on your time zone. But I wanted to look at the full moon ahead of time because it's quite an interesting full moon, a bit weird. In some ways also a little disturbing, but I'll be going into that later in this video. And first of all, I wanted to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, April the 11th. So let's look at what's going on. Usual reminder, if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you would indeed like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be over the moon to have you as a subscriber. So let's see what's happening. So here is the position of the planets for today, Friday, set for New York at noon, and the moon is now in Libra at 7 degrees 21 Libra at noon New York time, and the moon moved into Libra, well, London time, 2:12 this morning, or that would be 3:12 this morning if you're in continental Europe, like sort of Rome or Paris. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon will move into Libra a little bit later in the day. So there is a bit of a change there. We have had the moon in Virgo. The moon seemed to be in Virgo for ages, but now it's moved out. So that is a little bit different. Moon in Libra, it's in an air sign, and it's perhaps not quite as picky as the moon in Virgo. I'm not saying that people with moon in Virgo are picky. It's just, it might be that when the moon is in Virgo, we may focus on details a little bit more than usual. The material world may be pressing in on us, and we might feel that we have to respond. Though, with the moon in Virgo, at least the moon was in an earth sign. At least we had something in an earth sign. Of course, when the moon moves out of Virgo, it means that there are no planets in earth signs, except for Uranus in Taurus, which is a generational planet. So again, we're left with a certain lack of grounding, and we have to work things out through our ideas. And, we have our ideas, but ideas can sometimes drift off on their own. It's all great to have our own concepts, but to what extent are they realistic? And that sort of applies to all of us. And if you're a politician making big decisions, then you have to consider what is real. It's not just about making a big impression. Now, the thing about the moon moving into Libra is that it's now in the opposite sign to the sun. So that means that the build-up to the full moon has started. So maybe it's not so inappropriate to have a picture of the full moon on this thumbnail because it's beginning, and we're beginning to feel the tension of this full moon. Moon in Libra is potentially about compromise, trying to fit in. The sun in Aries, by contrast, is about being assertive, doing what is right, or rather what we think is right, and being able to take the initiative. So there is a conflict between those two forces, and this conflict hasn't reached peak because it's a Friday, and that full moon doesn't take place until the weekend, but it's starting. And so we're increasingly aware of that. And, full moons are about a realization, and some realizations are just starting. Maybe we're starting to see the consequences of our actions, and we hadn't fully got it in the past, but now it's becoming clear. And, when the moon moves into Libra, it makes two aspects to outer planets. So the first thing that happens when the moon moves into Libra, it makes an opposition to Neptune. And This is the first opposition between Moon in Libra and Venus in Aries, Neptune in Aries, for a long time, since the 1870s. So that's an aspect we haven't seen for, 150 years or more than that, 150 years? Yeah, about 150 years or so. And so that's kind of a new experience for us. None of us have ever experienced Moon in Libra opposition Neptune in Aries before. So enjoy the novelty. And it might be a somewhat confusing influence, perhaps because it is so new, having this feeling that we want to fit in, but also sort of collective forces are kind of encouraging us to do things differently. And how do we manage that? And additionally, we've got Sun starting to make a conjunction to Chiron. So this Sun conjunct Chiron has been getting stronger and stronger over the last few days. Now the Sun and Chiron are less than a degree apart. So the Sun Chiron conjunction is encouraging us to think about what we might want to do differently. It's not a time to be just following the tide, doing what we're supposed to be doing, not rocking the boat. That's not how Sun and Chiron sees it, at least this conjunction. And at the same time, we do want to compromise, but we know we shouldn't compromise. So it's all a bit of a conflict there. But this Sun conjunct Chiron, some of us may feel that it is time to stick our necks out, to do things differently, and maybe to stand up for what we believe in. Additionally, the Moon is making a trine to Pluto. Perhaps that's what we need. Moon trine Pluto can just be about clearing things out. And Pluto is about regeneration, and that actually might be how some of us feel. The Moon in Virgo could have been quite exhausting, particularly because Moon in Virgo was opposition Saturn in Pisces, and the Moon trine Pluto may allow us to sort of turn over a new leaf. And that's the viewpoint from New York. If we look at the positions of the planets at noon set for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia and East Asia, the Moon is at 0 degrees Libra at noon. So that does mean that certainly from lunchtime onwards, if you're in Australasia, the Moon is in Libra. Some of the morning, the Moon could be in Virgo, and so that would be very late in Virgo, and it may feel that things just aren't happening, that you're not quite sure where things are going. And then when the Moon moves into Libra, that's when things start to become clear. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the day might have a slow start, but eventually, not even eventually, I mean pretty quickly, by around lunchtime, even late morning, the Moon will be in Libra. And then there is the heliocentric viewpoint. These are the positions of the planets from the viewpoint of the Sun. And Sun, we have Sun conjunct Chiron geocentrically, which is the same as Earth opposition Chiron heliocentrically. And there it is, the Earth-Chiron opposition. And it's now pretty close. And I just like the heliocentric view because it shows the conflict. And it shows the conflict about Earth in Libra trying to do what is right, not trying to cause too many problems, but Chiron and Aries, we want to be noticed. We want to be a maverick, and we don't want to follow the rules. I don't know whether or not you should use signs in heliocentric charts. I mean, the sun is, of course, in Libra. Sorry, the sun is in Aries, and the Earth is in Libra. Can we really talk about the Earth being in Libra? But then Libra and Aries are two signs that are obviously opposite each other. So within each represents the germ of the other. Maybe within every Aries there's a Libra trying to get out, and and the same can be said for Libra. Libra is trying to find its inner Aries. So that's arguably the main heliocentric aspect, which is repeated geocentric, which is repeated geocentrically, albeit in a different form. And Mercury is in heliocentric Sagittarius. So Mercury is making a sextile to Pluto, and it's also starting to make a square to Mars. And so you could say that Mars, Mercury, Pluto are kind of coming together. Mercury, Mars, given the context, what we know about the world, and with tariffs, and Trump's just said he's pausing the tariffs, but some commenters are saying it's not making any difference in the end. The world still has a problem. Mercury square Mars just could be about bold words. People in power saying bold words. It's all part of the propaganda battle. And Mercury is additionally making a sextile to Pluto, and that's more about propaganda and trying to have an influence. For example, I noticed that I was told that the Chinese are trying to have an influence on Australia. I think there was an article in some Australian newspaper, suggesting that maybe the Chinese and the Australians can get together and sort out this problem. They're trying to have an influence on opinion formers in Australia, but that's what you'd expect with Mercury sextile Pluto, Mercury square Mars, and that was on Wednesday, and now it's perhaps going to be more intense. So there are a lot of battles for hearts and minds at the moment, and I would have said that's the main thing going on. Oh, Venus and Mars. So Venus and Mars have been applying to a sextile heliocentrically. That Venus-Mars sextile is now exact, and Venus-Mars sextile, you could say, it's just more persuasion, trying to use inducements to get people to do things your way. And again, that's what the world is about. People are desperately struggling for influence. Though Venus sextile Mars could operate on a more personal level, it should facilitate relationships and finding ways to get on with people, finding ways to be attractive. So maybe that Venus sextile Mars is something all of us can use in our daily life, because we want to be liked, don't we? And perhaps with Venus sextile Mars, we can find a way to attract people's attention in a favourable way. So those are a few thoughts about the geocentric and heliocentric positions today. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, April the 11th, 2025. Aries. The moon is finally out of Virgo. It's in Libra, and that does represent a big change. It means that you're perhaps less concerned about getting things absolutely right in a material sense, and instead the social dimension, the interpersonal dimension, is taking up more of your time, or at least could be taking up more of your time. The moon is just edging into Libra, and it doesn't make any serious aspects. Okay, it does make an opposition to Neptune and a trine to Pluto, But these aspects are somewhat vague, and they may be optional. But you can take advantage of them if you want to. And could they undermine you? I mean, ever so slightly. I mean, with the moon making an opposition to Neptune, then it could represent a certain tension there. You feel that you are obliged to make your presence felt, but you're not quite sure why. That might be Neptune in Aries, and the moon opposition Neptune is encouraging you to think about other people. That's true, but relationships could be just a little bit confusing, and it may be you are confusing. Now, that may say something about Neptune moving into Aries, and Aries has a reputation for being quite a straightforward sign. You say it as it is. You don't use more words than you have to, and generally people understand you because you make yourself clear. But with Neptune moving through Aries, things may have changed a little. You may be quite capable of putting up smoke screens. Again, that is not something one would normally associate with Aries, but maybe for the first time with this moon opposition Neptune, this is an aspect that you've never experienced before. You've never had Neptune moving through your sign with moon opposition Libra. I mean, Aries. Well, if you were Bismarck, who was an Aries, you would have experienced this in the 1860s and 1870s, the last time Neptune was in Aries. But no one alive has experienced this before, and so we could be looking at something quite experimental, quite novel, and you may have the opportunity here with moon opposition Neptune to see how you can be confusing and misleading, and you might even enjoy it a little bit. And this might help you if you're trying to hide something or trying to hide your intentions, if you're negotiating. So it may not be such a bad thing, the moon opposition Neptune, but I do think that it will be interesting. And in general, with the moon moving through Libra, I think if you handle yourself right, you can assert yourself and you can be in control. And moon does make a trine to Pluto, and that should empower you. But if you want to be in control, if you want to be powerful, you have to make a special effort to deal with other people in the right way. Try to understand who different people are. Try to understand their personalities, and if you take the time, I do think that really is something you can do. And additionally, from a heliocentric view, there is a sextile between Venus and Mars, and this Venus-Mars sextile is exact. And I think that this Venus sextile Mars, does allow you to be influential. It may not be immediately the case, but if you just make some small effort to get people's attention and to be nice to them on your terms, if you make some small effort in that direction, I think that people will respond to you. They'll respond to you very well, and you're going to seem, with that Venus sextile Mars, you're going to be relevant, and your message will be relevant. And I think people will take the view that you've got something important to offer, and you just have to present it in the right way. But I think that is something that today you know how to do. Taurus, you may feel that you need time to sort yourself out. There are things you want to do, and you're also aware that there are certain things that just aren't quite right, and that means that you shouldn't feel pressurized to reveal everything you are, and at some level you might not feel that you're ready. And so if you don't feel ready, then you shouldn't allow yourself to be pushed out into the limelight. There's still things there are still things you're working on, and there are actually, Taurus, there are still things you don't understand. You don't get it. A lot of things seem just a little bit up in the air, a little bit chaotic, and you probably need to just give yourself time to work it out. And additionally, Taurus, you might be feeling a bit fragile because Venus is on the verge of going stationary direct. Now, Venus goes stationary direct over the weekend, and overall I think it's a good thing Venus going stationary direct. But with Venus, your ruler, pretty much at a standstill, that's how you feel. You do feel a little bit at a standstill, and so you're not in too much of a rush. You shouldn't be in too much of a rush, especially as Venus is also conjunct Saturn. So there is quite a lot for you to take on board and to think about, and just you're not ready on many different levels. And then you've got the full moon coming up over the weekend, and you're perhaps already starting to feel this full moon. And because the moon is in Libra, the sun is in Aries. It's certainly starting, and so why should you take risks? And it just maybe it may be a situation where you hopefully know what you don't know, and if you know what you don't know, then you know what you need to prepare. It could even be a situation where you don't know what you don't know, in which case there's a load of preparation to do, because you've got to wait to understand how little you understand. From your perspective, there are lots of things you understand. I'm not saying that there are any gaps there in your knowledge. I'm just suggesting that things are a bit complicated, and you're starting to realize how complicated they are. And it's kind of a good thing that it's the end of a week and that you've got the weekend to sort of work through it all. Now, on a positive note, Taurus, Venus is making a sextile to Mars, heliocentrically. Geocentrically, it's not, but I do think it's worth looking at these heliocentric aspects. Now, if we do a comparison of the geocentric heliocentric view, then Venus actually is making a trine to Mars geocentrically, because we got Venus in Pisces trine Mars in Cancer, but it's some way off. I think it's quite subtle, that influence. But heliocentrically, we've got an exact sextile between those two planets, and that sextile does allow you to protect yourself, protect your own interests, even if you're not feeling 100%. You know when you need to stand up for yourself, and you know how much effort to put in. You don't have to go for some sort of big conflict situation. You can just say what you believe and know when to stop. And there are many ways of protecting yourself, and one of the best ways of protecting yourself is just to leave. If you're somewhere where you're feeling at a disadvantage, you just don't have to be there. And that may be one way in which Venus sextile Mars can work. Or Venus sextile Mars can allow you to just present your view, and if you can just link that view with other people's concerns, be ever so slightly manipulative with it, then you can find common ground with these people, and they can understand what you're saying and what you're trying to achieve. Also, Venus sextile Mars from an interpersonal angle is not such a bad aspect, and it may allow you, if need be, to find common ground with another person, maybe with someone who you might have recently experienced a little bit of tension, and it might have felt that something was blocked, but now with this Venus sextile Mars heliocentrically, you may, with a little bit of effort, find ways of finding real and lasting connections. Gemini. Gemini, the moon is changing sign. It's changing sign from Virgo into Libra. And, moon in Virgo from a Gemini viewpoint is possibly not particularly interesting. And it may even have been a little bit difficult because the moon in Virgo was making an opposition to Mercury in Pisces, and you may have felt that you were distracted, or there were things going on that you really didn't really want to bother with, and you felt a bit torn, and you just weren't being given the space you required. I mean, you had plenty of space in a way, but it still didn't feel satisfactory. And it might have been that family and domestic issues were weighing in on you. But now that the moon is in Libra, things are changing. And with the moon in Libra, you've got the moon in an air sign, and so there is a trine relationship between Libra and Gemini by definition. And with the moon in an air sign, you have more freedom, and it's easier to express yourself. And the moon, when it moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Pluto. It does make an opposition to Neptune as well, but the trine to Pluto does seem useful, and it allows you to move beyond yourself a little bit, and you can allow yourself to be influenced by new information. You have a lot of the answers, Gemini, but you don't have all the answers, and you're always on the lookout for something new and exciting, and that moon trine Pluto can just shift things and make you aware of something that you'd never really been aware of before. You kind of knew it existed, but you hadn't really taken it seriously. And when you take it seriously, you may be quite amazed. So with moon trine Pluto, it's important to have an open mind, and also just to be aware that other people could have quite a lot to offer. So, but you don't know what they've got to offer until you ask, until you find out. So, try to understand other people, try to listen to them. You don't have to accept what they say at face value, but in general, your ability to get on with people at the moment is pretty good. And if we look at things from a heliocentric view, let's just quickly go back to the heliocentric chart. So there's Mercury, which is your ruler heliocentrically, and you can see that heliocentrically Mercury is sextile Pluto and it is square Mars. So perhaps those two aspects could be of relevance to you. So if Mercury is sextile Pluto, then you have the opportunity to discover new things, and it's supportive of that moon trine Pluto. So there's moon trine Pluto geocentrically, Mercury sextile Pluto heliocentrically, and so you don't have to be satisfied with existing knowledge. And also with Mercury sextile Pluto, if you know something, remember Mercury sextile Pluto heliocentrically, if you know something, then it's absolutely possible that you can actually leverage this knowledge. And that's something Geminis often can do. You know something that other people don't know. And it might have been just quite obvious how you picked up this information, something as simple as reading an article on Wikipedia, which anyone could have done, but you're the only person that bothered to do it, and you find something out that's just really interesting. It could actually be quite compelling. And so maybe, Gemini, you can boost your influence by using the knowledge you have, even if you yourself don't regard that knowledge as being a particularly big deal. Now, heliocentrically, we also have a square between Mercury and Mars. So Mercury and Mars is quite a vibrant aspect, and it could be about you feeling that you just want to express your opinion with enthusiasm, though not everyone is going to be particularly appreciative of what you have to say. But maybe it's a time when you just have to be honest about what you feel. But I think you have enough sensitivity, Gemini, to ensure that you don't cause huge amounts of offense. You know what people can put up with. You know people's limits. And so maybe you can take things to the limits in terms of what you're saying, what you're discussing, the kind of viewpoints you're trying to present. And when you reach those limits, you can sort of pull back. So in general, today could be interesting. You've got the moon in Libra now. Moon in Libra, that's a fun place for the moon to be. So you can do things that you enjoy, that are intellectually stimulating, and a lot of people are going to appreciate who you are and what you're presenting. A few people might find it a bit threatening, but as I've just said, you know how far you can take things, and you won't push things too far unless you want to. I mean, you might want to, you might feel that now is a good time to have a good argument, but that's probably not such a good idea. Cancer. Cancer, the moon is now in Libra, and we do have a build-up to the full moon. And so, full moons are important events for all of us, and they're important for Cancerians in particular, because the moon is a planet that is of particular relevance to you. And with the moon in Libra, Cancer, you're aware that things are changing, and also that things may be reaching some kind of a critical stage, and you therefore are of a view that you have to be careful. You don't want to be in too much of a hurry, because because a certain amount of delicacy is required, and it's actually possible that you yourself might feel quite delicate with the build up to this full moon. So what do you actually do? Well, Cancer, you might feel that it's best to do not very much, and if there are things that you trust, then you should stick with them. And possibly it's not a good time for going on adventures. You can have your adventures, but maybe not now. And it's better to herd your resources, make sure that you are feeling good and feeling comfortable, and perhaps that's what matters. And the moon, as it moves into Libra, it makes a couple of aspects of interest. It makes an opposition to Neptune, and moon opposition Neptune is an aspect that happens pretty regularly, once a month. But this is the first time we've had moon opposition Neptune, moon in Libra opposition Neptune, since the 1870s. So it's a very new aspect, and you could say that you're privileged to experience it. Yeah, some people will not have experienced Moon opposition Neptune, at least Moon in Libra opposition Neptune in Aries, and so it just could be a slightly new experience, and that might be how you feel today. That you're emotionally feeling something that, yeah, you've never experienced it before. It's not that it's bad, by the way. It's just something different, and that is another good reason why you don't want to push yourself too far. You need to get used to a new set of feelings, and to be specific, you're at some level aware of a new challenge, and it possibly has something to do with Neptune moving into Aries, because Neptune has just gone into Aries, and so Aries is a cardinal sign, and what I think I told you about Neptune moving into Aries, it is about you and your public role, and what this public role is and how it's changing. And with Neptune in Aries, there is increasingly, I think, going to be a demand for leadership. People who are leaders, who can assert themselves, who can present a clear and simple view of the world, and they can act in maybe a slightly selfish way. But this kind of thing is going to be appreciated over the next 13, 14 years between now and the 2030s. And at first, that sounds a bit strange. And maybe you can feel the pressure here. Perhaps the pressure is on you to be more assertive, to be more of a leader, because leaders are in demand, and this is not something you want to do. And perhaps with this Moon opposition Neptune, you can feel this kind of challenge for the first time. At least that's one way of looking at it. It may not be about society. It could be about you just feeling something about what you should be doing, what you were born to be doing. And Neptune in Aries can say something about the past as well as the future. It could be about pressure from authority figures in your life, not just now, but in the past, like your parents, particularly your mother, because it's Neptune is in Aries, which is the 10th house. 10th house, we kind of think about time birth charts, but if we're taking a chart and we're putting Cancer on the ascendant, then Aries becomes the 10th house. So that may be how Neptune in Aries is working. And then Moon opposition Neptune just does indicate some powerful thoughts, and so it could be quite an intense day, but I don't think a bad day. I think it just could be powerful, and you might just get a sense of what you can do, and what you can do if you had the motivation. But right now, in terms of actual action, Cancer, I don't actually think you have the motivation. I think you want to keep things at a quite low level, and you want to conserve your energy, and you regard things as being a little bit complicated. And that's perhaps the best way of responding to Moon in Libra. It's so look after yourself and respect your own limits, but just be aware of the possibility of new feelings that you may not have experienced before, but feelings which I think in the end are going to turn out to be quite constructive. Leo, Sun is getting really close to Chiron now, and with Chiron, I never quite know what to think. for a long time I kind of ignored Chiron almost as a matter of principle, but doing these videos, I keep coming across Chiron, and so I have to say something about it. I do think that the Sun Chiron conjunction is relevant to all of us. I think it's relevant to you, and I've already talked about it. And my opinion on Chiron is that it can be about the desire to do things differently, to do things your way, not other people's way. It's not about fitting in. And so, Leo, you have to very much regard yourself as an individual, and there are things you don't necessarily want to do, but you may feel obliged to do. And so when you go about your daily routines, whatever you're doing today, you just may feel that there are just opportunities to assert yourself in rather unusual ways. And you might also be just thinking about your impact. And that's what matters. It's getting a reaction. And if everything is the same, if people just follow expectations, if you follow expectations, then that's just not very satisfactory, and you are going to be quick to feel dissatisfied. And I think maybe over the last couple of days you have been feeling dissatisfied. But now that the moon is in Libra, I think it's going to be much easier for you to make an impact. And it's not just in Libra. The moon is making a trine to Pluto, and it's also making an opposition to Neptune. And it just could be that people are more sensitive than usual, and it's easier to stir them up. And if you can get a reaction out of people, in many cases that is absolutely the right thing to do. Just the key thing is being in a position where you are absolutely able to express yourself, and you're able to express your unique view, and you shouldn't care too much about the level of disruption you cause. It just may be a time when disruption is a good thing. It forces people to think. And you could say that the Sun conjunct Chiron is about, what do they say? It's not about comforting the disturbed, but it's rather disturbing the comfortable. Maybe some people are too comfortable, and your job is to stir them up. And if you can do that, you're having a good day. You're having a day when you are living up to your short-term destiny. And also, Leo, the concept of freedom really, really does matter to you. You do not want to be constrained. And when the moon was in Virgo, you may have felt that you just couldn't properly express yourself. You had to keep things to yourself. But now the moon is in Libra, there is greater opportunity to be yourself. And if something has been holding you back, Leo, then you have a chance to basically push it away, to break the chains. And it may also be a question of something that had been bothering you for some time, and finally you get the solution, you get it, and it takes you a bit of thought, but finally you know what needs to be done, and there may then be a great sense of relief. Finally, it's over, you're free from it. And that moment of freeing yourself from something may require a little bit of courage, because you never know how the world is going to respond. But once you've done it, you're just going to feel just so much better. And don't forget, Leo, that the sun is still in Aries. The sun is good. Sun is going to be in Aries for what? Just another week, just over. And Sun is in Aries. Sun is exalted in Aries. This is a time to just make the most of everything. This should be a great time of year for you, and maybe now is a time to really make the most of it, and not allow anything to hold you back, because you deserve to be completely free and to be, of course, happy in your freedom, and that's the way it should be, Leo. Virgo, the moon is out of your sign, and quite possibly you may feel quite happy that the moon is out of your sign, because when I was talking about yesterday, Thursday, I mentioned the fact that the moon was opposition Saturn, and I was suggesting that this moon-Saturn aspect wasn't necessarily great. It could have been a little bit burdensome, and now that the moon is in Libra rather than in Aries, you feel that something has changed, something has gone, and it may be that you're no longer under a particular type of pressure. Maybe that pressure was coming from another person, but now things have changed and things are actually a lot easier, and you can concentrate on the things that you want to do, and you can also consider some of your priorities. One priority might be your own resources, because moon in Libra can be about you deciding what you need to proceed. You can have ideas, but if you haven't got resources, then you're not going to be able to see these ideas through. But you can actually, I think, create the necessary changes, because when the moon moves into Libra, it starts making a trine to Pluto, and this moon trine Pluto really does allow you to sort things out. And if something has been denied to you, then you can find a way of actually getting hold of it through a bit of gentle persuasion. And you are going to be quite persuasive today. It's not just because there's moon trine Pluto, it's also because from a heliocentric view, Mercury is sextile Pluto. So Mercury heliocentrically, which is your ruler, sextile Pluto allows you to be persuasive, and if there's something you need, then you shouldn't have any problems being able to ask for it, and you will sound reasonable. You may have to come up with a few arguments to support your case, but I don't think that is going to be especially difficult, though heliocentrically, it's not just that the Mercury makes a sextile to Mars. A sextile to Pluto. It also heliocentrically, Mercury is making a square to Mars, and so heliocentric Mercury square Mars. You might say that there's a little bit of conflict there, a little bit of uneasiness, and it may be that a little bit of uneasiness is a good thing. Because, if everyone wants to be friendly and everyone wants to get on with each other, then there's no progress. And Mercury square Mars may allow you to maybe just point something out. You just have to point something out. And it immediately gets a reaction. And as soon as you get a reaction, you can start to have a dynamic, I won't say conflict, but you can have a dynamic exchange, and through this dynamic exchange you can make progress, and you can end up getting what you want, whatever it is that you want. And it may be something very material, it may be money, it may be some object that you really want to get hold of. So even though the moon is leaving Virgo, in fact today you probably have more power than you did yesterday. And from a relationship viewpoint, you don't have that moon opposition Saturn anymore. And you might find that other people are actually easier to deal with, even if you sometimes feel an inclination to argue with them. In general, other people are going to be less of a problem. They're not going to restrict your freedom of action so much. And that is a good thing. And also, if you want to be Virgo, you can actually be quite easygoing in the right circumstances, provided there's no pressure, provided there's nothing you're desperate for. You can be easygoing, and you actually will know how to get on with people and get on with society at large. And if there are any conflicts, it will probably be your choice. You will make a decision that you want to make an issue of something. But if you don't want to create complex, controversial points of argument, well, you don't have to. Libra. Moon is now in Libra, moving into your sign. And it doesn't matter what your time zone is. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it may be sort of as late as lunchtime, late morning, that Moon moves into Libra. But, it gets there in the end. And so with Moon moving into Libra, you're feeling better and you're feeling more dynamic, and you're ready to take on the world. But it's important that you have some idea about what you're going to do and how you're going to go about it. If you have no idea and if you have no plans, then there could be a problem. And the problem relates to the fact that the Moon is making an opposition to Neptune. And this Moon in Libra opposition Neptune in Aries is interesting. So oppositions between Moon and Neptune happen pretty regularly. They happen every month. But the Moon in Libra making an opposition to Neptune in Aries, well, the last time we had Moon in Libra opposition Neptune in Aries was in the 1870s. So it hasn't happened for around 150 years or more. And so it's a novel aspect. And of course, from now on, between now and the 2030s, we'll get Moon in Libra opposition Neptune in Aries every month, except, Neptune does briefly retrograde out of Aries and back into Pisces, but by and large, it's going to be a pretty regular aspect. But this is the first time you've experienced it. And so that is going to be interesting. And maybe rather than me tell you what it should be like, maybe you can just take notes. How does it feel to have Moon in Libra opposition Neptune in Aries? And it might be a little challenging. And, there's Moon in Libra, that represents you and what you're trying to sort out. And then Neptune in Aries is an influence from the outside. And what you might be aware of is that certain people are asserting themselves in new ways and are trying to get attention. And your first reaction might be rather negative. Why are people behaving in the way they're behaving? Why are they being so pushy about something that isn't really worth bothering with? But perhaps you're being reminded that times have changed. With Neptune moving into Aries, at least my theory about Neptune moving into Aries, that it is a time when if you want to be successful, you do have to be a little bit pushy. Pushiness and assertiveness are going to be appreciated while Neptune is in Aries, like it or not. And with that moon opposition Neptune, you may be reminded of how you need to be behaving. So by watching other people, you can get insights into yourself and how you should be doing things. And you might then realize that you just have to up the pace. And so with Moon in Libra, perhaps what you should be doing is experimenting with being more assertive, and being assertive in a Libran way. And that is sometimes about being manipulative, a little bit manipulative in a gentle fashion. But that's something, Libra, you might want to experiment with. And then the moon, having made an opposition to Neptune, it makes a trine to Pluto. So moon trine Pluto is a great aspect for a Libran. It is very empowering, and you recognize that you're someone who is in a position to create real change. And in order to create real change, maybe you just have to get into that Neptune in Aries vibe. You have to make a special effort to be assertive, but in a fun way. And you make suggestions, and you're enthusiastic about your suggestions, and you just go with it. And if people want to follow you, that's fine. If people don't want to follow you, don't worry. They'll follow you in the end. And from a heliocentric view, Venus is making a sextile to Mars, and with Venus sextile Mars, I think that you're going to be someone that people are going to want to follow. You can be strong, you can be assertive. It's a challenge to be assertive, but I think if you make the effort, then you're going to make a real impact. And Venus sextile Mars can just be about how you and another person get on with each other. And I think that it should work pretty well. Again, if you make the effort, because it is a sextile. Sextiles are about effort. So you make a little bit of effort, and you show that you are in accord with the times that you are living. That is important. We're not living in isolation here, and the world is changing. Neptune's moved into Aries, Pluto's moved into Aquarius, Uranus is about to move into Gemini. Things are changing, and if you show that you are in accord with our times, with our changing times, then people are going to like you, and particular people may really like you because of that, because you can actually be someone who is at the center of things, someone who understands how the world is changing. Scorpio, the moon is leaving Virgo and it's moving into Libra. And with the moon moving into Libra, you may feel that you want to just slow down a bit. You've done a lot, and you've been enjoying Mars going stationary, well, going direct for some time. Okay, it's been direct for quite a long time now, but every now and then there needs to be a time when you just need to just stop what you're doing, not feel that you are obliged. I mean, you can be obliged if you want to be. You're still someone who is in a very strong position. You're very influential. Again, if you want to be. But the pressure should be off. And over the next couple of days, as the moon moves through Libra, then enjoy the weekend. And that might be how it should be. And it's a Friday, so maybe the weekend starts on a Friday. I hope that's one approach you can take. Even if you can't enjoy the weekend, even if you've got things to do, Scorpio, then I don't think that you should feel obliged to be in the center of things. It might be best if you observe what other people are doing, let other people make the decisions, and you can be apart from it all. And I think that is probably the way it should be. I mean, certainly on Friday, today, and additionally, you might want to absorb the vibes, because yes, there is a lot happening. The moon is opposition Neptune, and this opposition between moon and Neptune is quite a subtle aspect, and the moon opposition Neptune is making a lot of people quite sensitive. I think it's making you quite sensitive, and so Scorpio, just accept the situation and just don't allow anyone to pressure you. Things will change in the end. Mars has been in Cancer for a long time, and just a reminder that soon enough Mars will move into Leo, and remember, Mars is your ruler. So Mars moves into Leo, to be precise, just to give you an idea. Mars moves into Leo so next week. I think I make it the 17th that Mars moves into Leo, or 18th, depends on your time zone, but sort of the 17th or 18th of April, Mars moves into Leo, and that is a big change, and that could very well force you to move into the limelight, to be center stage. There are things you're going to want to take action with. You're going to want to make you're going to want to make things happen, but you're not there yet. And so while Mars is moving through the last degrees of Cancer, then you should just make sure that your batteries are fully recharged. And this is in fact your last weekend where Mars is not in Leo, because I do think Mars in Leo could be quite exhausting. I mean, it could be and should be a very good thing, Mars moving into Leo. I think you're going to be able to accomplish a great deal, but you just have to get ready for it, and in the short term, not feel that there is so much pressure. Now, I can tell you to avoid pressure. Does that mean that you will always be able to avoid pressure? Well, not necessarily. And we do have a conjunction between the Sun and Chiron coming up, and this Sun Chiron conjunction might well have an influence on you, and you might be trying your very hardest to stay away from things, to be detached and distant, but something might happen, might be today, might be tomorrow, which you react to, and you feel that you just have to respond. You're not going to just let it go. And it may be that you feel you have to show people who you really are. You don't want to, but you feel you have to. And it's annoying, but it can't be helped. So, Scorpio, if you're in that situation, then maybe you just can't be stopped. Maybe you just have to make a final demonstration of who you are and what's important to you. I mean, ideally, it shouldn't be happening, but if you feel it has to happen, then Scorpio, then do what you have to do. And heliocentrically, there is a square between Mercury and Mars. And this square between Mercury and Mars potentially is exhausting. And it's about you being forced maybe to say something, or to or to express your opinion in no uncertain terms. And again, this is something that would be so nice to avoid, because ideally you'd be doing nothing today. But maybe that's not an option, and it depends what you're doing. And so one strategy you could have today is to just avoid anything that could conceivably get out of hand, and also avoid things which might upset you or might force you to take action. But I'm not 100% convinced that's the right approach. I mean, absolute avoidance from a destiny perspective is usually not the right strategy. So, Scorpio, there's a lot for you to think about, and you have to decide what you have to do, and you have to decide whether you can actually get away with being a hermit. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, it's going to be a better day than yesterday, I think. And part of a reason for that is that the moon is moving out of Virgo. Moon moving through Virgo was just a bit of a problem, because the moon in late Virgo, it was making an opposition to Saturn, and that moon opposition Saturn could have been a bit difficult. And now now that the moon is in Libra, you're just feeling more relaxed, and also you're finding that other people are less of a problem, less stressful, and in fact it's quite possible that you can actually start to enjoy other people's company. And so if you want to have an active social life today, then feel free. It's not that anything super dramatic is going to happen. The moon is moving through early Libra. It does make an opposition to Neptune, and it makes a trine to Pluto. The moon opposition Neptune, I don't think that's too much to worry about. But with moon opposition Neptune, you might find that if you are socializing with people, there may be moments or times when you don't quite know what's going on, and other people don't know what's going on either. So social activities could be confusing, and they could develop in unexpected ways, but maybe they can develop in ways which might be interesting. I don't think they're going to be massively exciting. I just don't think today is an especially exciting day, but it certainly could be an interesting day. And then the moon makes a trine to Pluto, and this moon Pluto trine is useful. I think it allows you to be influential, and it allows you to have an impact. So the things you say are going to get noticed, and people are going to take you seriously, and you don't have to make too much of an effort. It's not about having to get involved in a conflict or having to argue. You just express yourself. People are happy that you're expressing yourself, and you can be the center of attention if that is what you want. And another reason why socializing might be a useful activity is that something might happen that you weren't fully expecting. It is an opportunity to meet someone new, who is just very different from what you're normally normally used to. And so social variety could be helpful, and it could be invigorating. So just do see what's available, but at the same time, you shouldn't be expecting huge events. And I think the reason is that the moon is still very early in Libra. The moon does start making a trine to Jupiter, but that moon trine Jupiter is more about tomorrow. So when the moon trines Jupiter, that's a great aspect, but you're not there yet. And so when I look at your horoscope for the weekend, in particular Saturday, I'll be able to talk about that moon trine Jupiter and how you might be able to benefit from it. One other point I should make is that the Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Chiron. That Sun conjunct Chiron is exact tomorrow, Saturday, but it's only 1 degree apart, and that Sun conjunct Chiron, I think, could actually be very creative for you, and it's something that you need to start working on if possible. So remember that Sun conjunct Chiron, it's not exact today, but it is exact tomorrow. So basically over the next few days, over the weekend, really trying to get into that Sun conjunct Chiron. And it could be about you being able to do something that is really unique, is an essential part of who you are. So however you are creative, different Sagittarians have different ways of being creative. Maybe you're an artist or you write. Even if you're not a professional artist or writer, you can still create something. I know writing stuff is really, really a problem now with ChatGPT. I've started having conversations with ChatGPT. It's very, very disturbing with ChatGPT because when I first started playing with ChatGPT, it was quite dry, but now ChatGPT has this sense of humor, which I find that really scary. This thing seems to have a sense of humor, and it seems to be spontaneous, and that really bothers me. And anyway, even though you've got ChatGPT to worry about, you're still able to create something new with your words, and it may not be words, it may be what you're creating with art or something else. However you like to be creative, at the moment you can be really creative, and you can do something of real individual significance, and it just is important to be an individual over the next few days, Sagittarius. Capricorn, you feel that it's time to be noticed. You want to be noticed. I think that over the last couple of days you've had the opportunity to be noticed, but you haven't always been very happy about it. There are things that you wanted to do, and you wanted to do it. You wanted to do it in your own way, and you were somewhat modest, I think. There's nothing wrong with being modest, but now things are changing, and as you move into the weekend, you kind of feel that there's something that you really need to achieve, and that might be connected with the full moon, because we've got a full moon over the weekend, and now that the moon is in Libra, the full moon has very much started, and so with this full moon, you see things that you haven't seen before, even though it's just started, even though the full moon isn't for another day or even 2 days. It is beginning, and you're beginning to become very aware, and you want to start doing things right now. And so even though it's Friday, there may be things you want to start working on. And the moon is in Libra. It's making a trine to Pluto. So Capricorn, this is a time when you need to quite possibly assert yourself, and also start to change things. Because if you're honest, you'll realize that things aren't as good as they should be. It's not your fault, it's perhaps other people's fault, that things have perhaps slipped a little, but now you have to get things back on tracks. And Moon trine Pluto, I think, will allow you to do this. And additionally, Capricorn, it's a time when there are so many things you can do, and your abilities and your talents are really on top form right now. And so you perhaps felt that over the last couple of days you didn't really have the full opportunity to show the world what you can do. But now you've got that opportunity. It may be unfortunate that we're now running into the weekend, and the weekend is traditionally traditionally a time where people don't do much. But for you, I think the weekend is important. Certainly Saturday, and maybe you should regard Friday and Saturday as being a continuation. So whatever you're doing today, don't stop, keep going on it. And it might be counter to expectations. It might be counter to the expectations, for example, of your family, or close friends. But still, what's necessary. And if you feel that something's important, just keep going with it. And as you move into Saturday, the moon will move on through Libra, and it will start making a trine to Jupiter, and that moon trine Jupiter may really allow you to work on something important. So perhaps you should be preparing for that. And Capricorn, it's certainly not a time for slacking off. Aquarius, it's an easier day than Thursday. So you're going to feel more relaxed, and you're not going to be taking things quite so seriously. And that is because the moon is now out of Virgo, moving into Libra. Libra is an air sign, and that just gives you space, moon moving into Libra. You don't find yourself over-interpreting things, worrying about things so much, and you can start to be aware of possibilities rather than problems. And so Aquarius, be as positive as possible, and really sort of open your eyes. And it's a time to be looking around you, see what opportunities are available to you, and don't underestimate your own power, because the moon is, when it moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. And so this can be really invigorating. And if you felt that things were getting a little bit stale and it was always just the same old, now things are changing, and you can take something new, perhaps that you find on your travels, and you can make it a fundamental part of who you are. And also we have a opposition between the moon and Neptune. As I've been telling some of the signs, this moon opposition Neptune is very novel. The moon Neptune oppositions, they happen regularly, they happen every month. But the last time the moon in Libra was opposition Neptune in Aries was in the 1870s. So that was 150 years ago. So this is a new experience, and because it's a new experience, that is something that you should be embracing. And moon opposition Neptune, we can be negative about Neptune, but I don't think we should be. I think that moon opposition Neptune gives you access to new knowledge which is not of an intellectual nature. It's of a cosmic, somewhat emotional nature, but not just standard everyday emotions. We're talking about emotions that are connected maybe with the collective unconscious, moon opposition Neptune, and you just get a feel for the way things are going to be. And so a lot of people at the moment are struggling to understand the future, but Aquarius, with the moon opposition Neptune, and indeed with the moon trine Pluto, and Pluto moving through Aquarius, your sign, it's a day when you can really start to see where things are going. It's not just about getting upset that Trump is doing something or the Chinese are responding in a particular way. It's not just about that. It's looking at it from a longer term view. As I say, someone like Trump, he's just an instrument of the collective, and you, Aquarius, you are a very future orientated sign. At least that's how many people see Aquarius. That is an aspect of Aquarius. There are problems with Aquarius. Aquarius can be a sign that's associated with totalitarianism, but not, I don't think, in an individual chart. And so if you want to know what's happening, then you can start to get a real understanding of what's happening today. And there is particularly, the novelness of this moon opposition Neptune. So if you have insights today, really make the most of them. And also, don't feel that you're on your own. The sun is starting to make a conjunction to Chiron, and this conjunction between Sun and Chiron, well, it's exact tomorrow, but it could be relevant to you via another person, because the Sun rules Leo, your opposite sign. So there are two ways of looking at this Sun conjunct Chiron. The standard way of looking at Sun conjunct Chiron would be to say, well, for you, the Sun represents another person in your life who may have a wound. That could be an interpretation, because if you take the view that Chiron is a wounded healer, so someone else has a wound and there could be an issue of healing, and you have to address another person's issues and problems, and who's doing the healing. So that's one way of looking at it. I'm not saying that is a wrong way of looking at it. An alternative approach with Chiron is to say that Chiron is different, wants to do things differently. So Sun conjunct Chiron could be someone who is not happy with the status quo, wants to break the mold. And so you may have an opportunity to benefit from another person's revolutionary spirit. So you might not fully have the revolutionary spirit yourself. Aquarius is often a sign that is associated with revolutions, but I'm not convinced that people with Sun in Aquarius are the actual revolutionaries. It's often other signs, for example, Taurus, even Capricorn. Taurians can be revolutionaries. Of course, Aquarians can be revolutionaries, but it may not be always down to you to actually make the revolution happen or to lead the revolution. And so you may be able to interact with other people who have a revolutionary view of the world, and they want to do something differently. And this is all part of the process of working out what's happening and where things are going. And you can be part of the change. You don't want to just be a passenger where you just don't know where things are going. You can be really a part of it. You don't have to be leading the change yourself, but you can certainly be associated with it, and you can have an influence on it. Pisces, things are changing. we have the moon moving out of Virgo into Libra, and possibly that might be a little bit of a relief, the moon moving out of Virgo. The problem with the moon in Virgo was that the moon was making an opposition to Saturn, it was making opposition to Venus, in fact it was making an opposition to Mercury as well, and it was on the south node. And that Pisces Virgo axis, that is the main axis in your chart. And so with the moon moving into Libra, things may just be a little bit easier, and you're not so directly involved with everything, and you don't have to worry so much about what other people are doing. And so that might make you feel that things are getting better. It doesn't mean to say that things aren't still somewhat complicated. The moon, when it moves into Libra, it does make an opposition to Neptune, and with that moon opposition Neptune, you're aware of other complications, but they're more general, and they're not necessarily specific to you and specific to the people around you and the people you have to deal with. And it's a kind of complication that probably you can work with, and there's just less pressure. And so this change probably works in your favor, and you're also helped by the fact that you're not going to be so much the center of attention. You're not going to feel that you're being watched, that you're obliged to do something, you're obliged to behave in a particular way. That's not the case. So Pisces, you probably have more freedom, and you have the freedom to explore, and you have the freedom to try to work out what is happening, and if there are mysteries around. There are always mysteries, and if there's a mystery that you want to get to the bottom of, then now with the moon in Libra making opposition to Neptune, making a trine to Pluto, then perhaps that's something that you can start to work with. And it's important over the next couple of days, Friday, Saturday, that you don't feel any great sense of obligation, because I just don't think that there's really anything you actually have to do at the moment. I don't see any immediate pressure involving you. You might still feel pressure, and you're aware. You are aware that you're living in a complicated world, but you don't have to do anything you don't necessarily want to do. And you might additionally, Pisces, reach some conclusions. Some answers are available, but you can't find these answers in a team. Teamwork is probably not going to work. You have to do it on your own, and it's a solitary journey. But you want to be alone at some level, I think, at the moment. And on your own, you cover a fair amount of ground, and you reach some answers. And don't forget that we've got a full moon coming up, and when the moon moves into Libra, which is now starting to move into Libra, we've got the sun in Aries, so that full moon is going to encourage you to look for things. And with the full moon, it might be on Saturday, it might be on Sunday, it depends on your time zone, there might be a realization, and you get it. And the reason you've got it is because you've given yourself some space. You're not crowded out by loads of other people demanding your attention, creating problems that you don't really want to have to deal with. And because you've got that space, you can come up with solutions to material problems. It's not just emotional or spiritual. This full moon could actually have quite a financial dimension to it, where you actually see things financially for what they really are, and that allows you to actually take action. But I'll be talking about this full moon in greater detail when I do your horoscope for the weekend. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today, Friday, from the view of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 42, increase. Now, if you had watched this video, or rather the I Ching section of my Thursday's video for yesterday, I also had increase. So increase has repeated itself. So that suggests that at some level what's going on today is a continuation of what was going on yesterday. And increase is, as its name suggests, 42 is about increase. We are able to increase what we have, and it's fortunate. And it does seem that many of us today are going to have more than our fair share of good fortune. We're going to have opportunities to get more of what we have, to make more. Whatever's good in ourselves, we can increase it. And if we are fortunate enough to be given these opportunities, then we have got to make the most of them. And that's something that the I Ching makes very clear. We cannot be complacent. And so when things start going our way, and I think that they could go our way, then we have to build on the opportunity, and we need to just make sure that it's not just us benefiting, but also it's other people it's also other people benefiting as well. So things do look good, but there is that pressure to just make sure that we're really making the most of what we have, because the universe hates it when it gives us opportunities and we just take them for granted. Now, there are moving lines, and I've talked about some of those moving lines. The first line moves, the second line moves, then the fourth line moves. The fourth line is kind of interesting, because the fourth line is indicating that the capital needs to be moved. Well, this is, of course, from a Chinese perspective and Chinese history. And the I Ching says that very frequently in ancient China, because of various wars between competing factions, you had to keep moving the capital, because if you kept the capital, presumably if you keep the capital in one place, but there are threats from enemy armies, your capital is going to be captured. So you've got to keep moving. And so with that fourth line, the capital needs to be moved. Now, what does that mean for what's happening on Friday? It's like the center of our attention and of our activity perhaps needs to be moved. Now, that might literally mean that if we are doing something, maybe in a particular place, we're doing something really useful in a place, maybe in a room or in a house or in an apartment or whatever, wherever it is, we should, at some stage, move things. So this is a very material interpretation of it. We might need to just move our operations. Literally put everything in a box or boxes and just go somewhere else. But the reason being because we know that something's going to change, that we're going to have to move anyway, or if we want to keep doing what we're doing in a successful way, and if we don't move, we're going to get completely disrupted. So I would have said, if you're doing something that's working and you're really, really comfortable with it and you're increasing, and you just might want to just keep going. But if you were to just keep going, there would be a disruption. And you have to be ready for that disruption. And that means, or might mean, physically changing where you are operating from. And so don't get too complacent, especially if whatever you're doing has got a geographical dimension. I mean, of course, if you're doing something where there's no need to move, it's in your own house, your own home, and no one's going to force you to leave a room or anything like that, then then you're fine. But just do bear that in mind. Now, we have got 3 moving lines here. So when you've got 3 moving lines, the average is about 1. You can work it out mathematically. But 3 moving lines is quite a lot of moving lines. And so the more moving lines you have, the more volatility you have in the hexagram. And with 1 moving line, you kind of know that the message from one hexagram to another hexagram is not going to be so different. But when you have 3 moving lines, you can get a completely different message in the second hexagram. So with 3 moving lines, we move from increase to hexagram number 6, which is actually that is I've got that wrong. Well, it is conflict, but that's not what the line moves. So I'm just going to have to just change it. That was hexagram. Sorry about this. So yeah, it moves to hexagram 6, which is there it is. Okay, sorry about that. So hexagram 6, which is conflict, and you can see that hexagram doesn't look good, does it? Because you've got 3 unbroken lines at the top. That's the first trigram, but the 3 lines at the bottom represent the abyss. It's an intrinsically unstable hexagram, and so that 4th line moving, but we had to move our capital, we had to move our center of operations. That's talking about the conflict. We get all these benefits, but in the end, there's a struggle, and it may be that we just feel that we're being treated unfairly. That's another way of viewing conflict. Greg Winkup, in his translation of I Ching, he actually talks about this in terms of grievances. And so we have grievances. There are things that we're not happy about. We had all these opportunities and things were working well, and then something happens and we have to complain. And it's okay to complain. And if we're prepared to have the matter out, to be clear about what we don't like about the situation, then I think people will listen. And maybe from a heliocentric view, we've got Mercury square Mars, and that might be the kind of conflict that we're looking at. So it's a shame that it ends like this, but we mustn't just accept the situation and say, we've been disrupted, we have to move our capital, we have to turn everything upside down because someone's being unreasonable, and we just accept the situation. No, we have to stand up for ourselves, air our grievance, and do it in a reasonable and rational way. And then I think that we can get round the problem, and we should be able to, in the end, resolve it. So that's the I Ching, and now I want to look at the full moon. The full moon happens tomorrow, but I just wanted to do a preview. I was thinking about doing the full moon when I did the video for the weekend, but then I was thinking, well, why not do it on the Friday's video, so I can give everyone some warning about this full moon, or some insights into this full moon. So let's start by looking at the chart of the full moon. And as I said, I think it's a somewhat weird full moon, actually. So let's have a look. So the full moon itself is here, and I've set the full moon for Washington DC rather than London. So this is set for Saturday at 8:22 p.m. Eastern time. So that means that if you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, the full moon will actually happen will happen on Sunday. So this full moon takes place at 23 degrees 20 Libra. So moon is at 23:20 Libra, sun is at 23:20 Aries. And we have an opportunity to see how Chiron works, because Chiron is at 23:01. 23:01 Aries. So this full moon is dead opposition Chiron. It's a Chiron. It's a Chiron. Did I say a new moon? It's a full moon. It's a Chiron full moon. And so we're going to see Chiron at work. Now, how is this Chiron going to manifest? Now, are there going to be lots of wounds with this full moon? Is it the wounded healer? Now, this full moon might reveal the wounds of society. We might realize how wounded our society really is, and on a personal level, it might connect with our own wounds and what we feel is wrong. And also on the plus side, some of us might realize, what good we can do. There's maybe a lot of good we can do. Maybe we might feel that we have an opportunity to make things better for the world around us. So that would be looking at the full moon in a really positive and constructive way. The full moon might also be disruptive, because Chiron is a disruptor. And I keep using this word. I perhaps overuse this word as the maverick and this force that is rogue. And that can be what Chiron is about. And so the full moon might, encourage some of us to, do things differently. We don't have to just follow the accepted way of doing things. And if we can be dramatic and rebellious, then that might be absolutely the right approach. And the full moon is also connected with Mars. I mean, not exactly, but there is a T-square here. So you've got Mars square, moon square Mars, got sun square Mars. So I think that's close enough to be of note. So there could be something quite combative about the full moon, and looking at the world at large, we're in a combative situation with tariffs, Ukraine, China, Middle East, full moon, square Mars. This might be where conflicts come out into the open. And as far as tariffs are concerned, Wednesday, Trump announced that he's put the tariffs on hold for 90 days, except for China. And you think this problem is just going to go away? Probably not. So it'd be interesting to see what people do over the weekend. And of course, a full moon is not just a one-day wonder. Full moons can last for a couple of weeks, even a month. So conflicts may come out into the open with this full moon. And so I do think that potentially it might be quite difficult, this full moon. And when you look at the full moon from the perspective of the 90-degree dial, you see something interesting that you perhaps don't see with the regular chart. And so this is actually something I really want to explore here. And so there's our full moon. Remember, in a 90-degree dial, oppositions become conjunctions, and so it's the midpoints that I'm interested in. And there's one midpoint I find really interesting, and that is the fact that this full moon is on the Pluto Hades midpoint. And I do want to talk a lot about I want to talk a lot about Pluto and Hades. Now, you might think that's absolutely crazy talking about Hades, a a hypothetical planet which Witter, the German astrologer Witter, claims to have discovered by reverse engineering events. You see events, astrology doesn't explain them, so you think there must be some hidden planet to explain those events, and so you come up with this hypothetical planet. It just sounds totally far-fetched, but in my experience, Hades does work. I've got some ideas about why Hades works, but maybe I'll talk about that. No, I don't want to talk about it yet. I think I probably want to wait till I've got a few more subscribers before I really want to talk about it. I mean, I think it's, yeah, I mean, I have definite ideas about why it's working. So with the full moon on the Hades, with the Pluto-Hades midpoint, Pluto-Hades is a pretty nasty pairing, by the way. If you look at Witter and his rules for planetary pictures, he goes through all the midpoints, and when we turn to Pluto-Hades, just to give you a flavour of Pluto-Hades, so the general principle of Pluto-Hades is unreliable, failure to act, dishonesty, downfall, to be on the decline, an evil change. The situation or condition worsens. You see, Hades is about garbage. It's about criminality. It is about things decaying. And that's perhaps why you connect Hades with garbage, stuff that is rotting and decaying, and then you put Pluto with that, and then really you do get an idea of things transforming, but not necessarily in a pleasant way. Decay, moving to sort of death, and things getting worse. And so with Sun on the Pluto-Hades midpoint, the man who physically fails, whose body is deteriorating, because the Sun is a male energy, chronic disease, or Moon on the Pluto-Hades midpoint, persons unreliable, decline of people without discipline and order, excited about a nuisance, rebelling against corruption. Now, if you are an opponent of Donald, if you think that Donald Trump is hell on earth, I was looking at one of the commenters comparing Donald Trump to Nero. If you take that view, I'm not taking that view, by the way. I am not giving any opinion. I'm just saying some people might see Trump and what Trump is doing with tariffs and the decline of a man. You might want to use this full moon on the Hades midpoint, on the Hades Pluto midpoint, to fuel your negativity about Donald Trump. Now, I'm not going down that road. You could see it in a completely different way if you were a supporter of Trump. But still, this full moon makes it clear to us that everything is in decline. There is a lot of corruption, that things are breaking down, and we're seeing evidence now that it really is just everything is in a state of, I won't even say collapse. Collapse is more dramatic. This is not like a dramatic collapse. It's not like Hades, Uranus. It's just more just things just decaying, and it's just slowly moving from bad to worse. But this full moon does make it clear. And so I actually think that this is what this full moon is about. Now, this 90-degree dial doesn't show Chiron, but if Chiron would be exactly here with the sun and the moon, and I think that so with Chiron on the Hades Pluto midpoint, it is that the wound of something of a chronic disease, because and there is something chronic about Chiron. If you think about the Chiron legend is about, how does it go, that Chiron was wounded by one of Hercules' arrows that had been dipped in the blood of the Hydra, and it was so bad that it was incurable. But Chiron was immortal, so he would never die. So that is chronic, just some malaise that just goes on, and you can't really cure it. It just goes on, and it's about the society we're living in. It's certainly about the economic order collapsing. It's not Trump's fault. People like to blame Trump, but Trump is just an instrument of the collective. It's important not to make it individual. And from a personal point of view, should we be worried? Well, I would have said that the full moon on the Chiron Hades, on the Pluto Hades midpoint is quite collective. I'm not saying that it's going to affect us personally, and it just may be about how society is unfolding, what we're seeing all around us. So that is a view of this full moon. So I think that with this full moon, it just will become very apparent how bad things are, and events may come to light which just really establish this. And I'm not, by the way, predicting that everything is going to collapse. I think there are strong arguments to think that whatever's going on short term, by the early summer, things should be starting to improve. So I'm not making any great statement about, for example, the stock market or the economy, but yeah, short term, certainly things do look difficult. Now, this full moon, we can try to use some astrocartography to try to work out different places where this full moon might be especially strong. So let's look at the astro map. Again, I must emphasize this astrocartography with full moon, new moons, full moons is really hit and miss. In theory, there are certain countries that could be particularly impacted by this full moon, but it's a theory, and it really doesn't always work. In fact, it usually doesn't work, but it's a technique, and I thought I would just go through it. And so you look at this red line here. The moon is on the midheaven, and the sun and Chiron are on the IC, going through Western Europe, far Western Europe, and going through Western Africa. And so, places that come to mind would be Madrid and Dublin. Even London is not quite there, but so Dublin is a place that we should maybe be looking at. And there are a couple of other places, like Spain, and because of Madrid, capital of Spain, and you've got Uranus on the descendant Uranus on the IC and Mars on the descendant crossing somewhere over Romania. So Romania might be a place that we need to look at. And again, I'll be looking at these charts in a moment. And Beijing, Jupiter seems to be quite close to the ascendant in Beijing at the time of this full moon. And also, I don't know. I don't even know whether you can see this. I might need to move this over. There's it's going through Beijing, and additionally, the full moon the sun is exactly over the midheaven, going through Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. So let's just quickly look at some of the charts for this. So here is okay. Let's start with the chart for Washington. So which is this chart here, and so. Set for Washington, this full moon is it's not exact, but it's interesting that true Black Moon Lilith is on the ascendant set for Washington. So true Black Moon Lilith, you might say that there is something dark and sinister going on in Washington, D.C. Dark forces are at work with true Black Moon Lilith, and Pluto is on the IC as well. So there are things happening here, and again, Washington D.C. is where all the action is, but it's not as exact as some of the other capitals that I've mentioned. So here's the full moon set for Dublin. So if you set the full moon for Dublin, you can see that the moon is exactly on the midheaven, and the sun and Chiron are exactly on the IC. And so Ireland is a country that is under a lot of pressure. I mean, under political pressure, you've got a migration crisis, and it doesn't seem to be a country that's particularly at ease with itself. I mean, a lot of countries in Europe aren't at ease with themselves, including the UK. But this full moon does seem to hit Ireland quite heavily, and Jupiter's exactly on a descendant there, and that may say something about the Irish government and what it's doing as far as foreign affairs are concerned. Difficult position for Ireland. It's part of the European Union, but it's got this very close connection with the United States, and so I don't think Ireland is. I mean, I don't really know anything about Ireland, but there always is this connection. And so, what is the EU doing with tariffs? I know that the European Union has just cancelled its retaliatory tariffs in response to Trump postponing his tariffs for 90 days. But from a foreign policy perspective, I do think that the Dublin government might be under quite a lot of pressure with this full moon, and you could say a similar thing for Madrid. Madrid again has got the moon on the midheaven. I don't know what's going on in Spain. No idea what's going on in Spain, but that is a capital city to consider. And Bucharest, Romania. Because we've had presidential candidates being struck off because their opinions don't appear to jive with what the government thinks and even what the European Union thinks. So there are new elections coming up. But with Romania, at the time of this full moon set for Bucharest, Uranus is on the IC, pretty close to Algol, and Mars is on descendant. So Bucharest and Pluto's not too far from the ascendant. So Romania may be a country that could be negatively impacted by the full moon. Beijing, in the middle of its tariff disputes with the United States, Jupiter rising, and Venus on not Venus on the midheaven. The midheaven's here. So Jupiter rising. So that's what China is trying to do. Maybe China is trying to be proactive, trying to be optimistic, trying to perhaps create rival trading blocks with this Jupiter rising. So maybe the Chinese government is trying its hardest to make the most of the situation or trying to mitigate the damage. Will it be successful? I wouldn't have said I can just look at a relocated full moon chart and give you an answer. If you look at the chart of China, because China came into being on 1st of October 1949 at I think 3:15 p.m. Uranus is right on China's IC, and so that's going to be difficult to get round. But China is going to be trying as hard as it can to fight these tariffs and to stand up for the United States. And I think that the Jupiter on the ascendant does show its intentions. And finally, there is Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand. And in Wellington, the midheaven is 2329 Aries. So this full moon is exactly on the sun is exactly on the midheaven set for Wellington. The moon is exactly on the IC. Of course, Chiron is exactly on the midheaven as well. And I don't know anything about New Zealand. I've never been there. I don't know what's going on politically. I tried to find out. I think that that there was some bill which trying to go through Parliament. I mean, to change the terms of some treaty with the Maori, how do you pronounce it, the Maoris, but it didn't go through. It massively failed. That was one thing I noticed. I didn't notice anything else, but there could be some kind of crisis in the government. I know that New Zealand has just recently put down its interest rates because it's like everywhere else. It's having to deal with these tariffs, but there just may be something going on in New Zealand. So if you're in New Zealand, kind of work it out for yourself, what you know about New Zealand. What could this full moon mean with Chiron exactly on the midheaven and the Sun Chiron conjunction exactly on the midheaven in Wellington, and the moon on the IC. So that gives us a view on this full moon, and I think a key point about this full moon is the fact that this full moon is on. Well, firstly, it's conjunct Chiron. Sun conjunct Chiron, opposition the moon. Secondly, this full moon is on the Pluto Hades midpoint, and I think that this Pluto Hades midpoint really is important. And I think maybe in my video for the weekend, I'm going to go into further details about the Pluto Hades midpoint with some examples. I was going to go through the examples today, but I've already gone on for long enough. So I think I'll be returning to the Pluto Hades midpoint in my next video. So thank you very much for watching. If you happen to enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And yeah, I will talk to you again tomorrow.